Delighted to be here today, and I'm joined by Luke Norris from Kamiwaza as well. And we're going to be talking today about, well, obviously AI, but really starting with Unleash AI, giving a little bit of background on what we've been doing from a program perspective, be able to talk about some of the announcements we just did at GTC, but really focusing on the partnership that we have with Kamiwaza and some announcements that we just made actually yesterday about Smart City AI, and bringing what, to tie into what Steve was talking about, making agentic AI and AI practical and tactical. It's kind of my favorite way of looking at it is there's a bunch of hype, there's a bunch of, promise and kind of the gleam in an engineer's eye, but how do we start to make it practical and tactical for our customers to actually get benefit from it as opposed to just stand in awe of it? So I joined HPE at the beginning of March, and I lead the Unleash AI program. So I wanted to explain a little bit about the program because we've been moving very quickly. And so we announced 28 new partners at the end of June at Discover. It was a quick blip in the keynote. However, wanted to explain a little bit more behind it other than the pretty picture of logos. And it really is working out and curating an innovation ecosystem and set of partners that are well respected in the industry and that have interesting capabilities to help create that last mile of the solution. Because in the end, our customers are looking for and our partners are looking for the entire solution. How do you bring together that total picture, that total value prop that somebody can use? It's not just talking about the blinky lights on the server. And don't get me wrong, we all love talking about blinky lights on servers and how fast they go. But in the end, what people are actually wanting to talk about, what people want to solve, are the challenges that they have on a day-to-day basis. So we bring in and work together with our ISVs to be able to create a really bi-directional partnership. And it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. My background is I've been in the channel. I've also worked with AI ISVs. And now sitting here from the HPE perspective, how do I make this partnership meaningful to everybody involved? The first goal is that it is a channel-first partnership. So while we'll pre-validate the technologies on HPE infrastructure to ensure that the rollout is very simple for our customers. We work first with the channel to be able to package this together, to be able to make it simple for our customers to be able to access these particular use cases and to help drive activation and go to market in the channel to bring awareness, because there's so much noise in AI. How do we help people know, hey, we can help you solve your 508 compliance challenge? Or, hey, you need to improve your fire detection. How can we help do that in a very straightforward manner? So as part of the HPE Unleash AI program, we work with our partners to be able to create collateral, create demos, do all of those things as though we were going to sell the software ourselves. We do enable our field. However, we also work to enable and grow all of this out in the channel and work with our channel partners to take it to market. What it allows us to do by doing all of that, it creates a much better end customer experience. And in the end, the goal and the real passion that we have around it is how do we create that faster time to value and not falling into that canyon of despair that people have somewhere between pilot to enterprise scale. And I drive marketing crazy. I talk for a whole long time on a slide, and then I'm like, oh yeah, and here's the other 3 slides they gave me. So the Unleash AI ecosystem, this is the ecosystem that was announced at the end of June. We also announced Nexus MD last week at Health. Was it last week? Last week at Health. And you'll continue to see announcements. Discover Barcelona's coming. Ooh, maybe there will be announcements there too. So this ecosystem will continue to grow. The big thing is we're not just looking to create logos on a wall, but to truly activate and to work together with individual ISVs as well as a collection of ISVs like we'll be talking about today in bringing together value-add solutions for our partners and customers. So this is a wide range of different use cases, of different types of AI, and that was all very intentional. It is not just a North America program, it is a global program. You will see additional European and APAC partners being brought into this as well, as a number of these can work across different areas. But you'll see everything on here from Vision AI to Agentic AI and everything in between. And so it's was very intentionally done to start to open that aperture of how can we help our customers solve the challenges they have today. So this is just some of the kind of example use cases, just to kind of set the table and then really dive into where we're working with Kamiwaza. So when you start to look at financial services, being able to look at that compliance scaling, risk score modeling, process automation, again, bringing very specific use cases, because a lot of our partners can do a whole bunch of things. But the way I explain it is that if you can do everything, then in the end, a seller doesn't actually hear that, and they hear that you do nothing. So how do we help give them that context and that ability to start a conversation so that they can correctly help connect the dots between that total end solution and the ISV, and then all of the supporting infrastructure. And yes, security, we do know, is being acquired by Veeam, but we won't change that until that actually closes in mid-December. Before somebody decided to point that out. The healthcare and life sciences, that is a passion area for me, doing some really fun things there and adding some new additions. Manufacturing and retail, obviously a large space where there's a ton of capability and opportunity to bring forth, how do you take off those mundane tasks, or how do you process huge amounts of information at once, given the dynamic and ever-changing environment that we live in? You know, are tariffs going to be this or this today? What is the potential impact on supply chain? There's going to be a hurricane here. Is there an impact on your supply chain? All of those sort of things. How are you able to do that, particularly when you start to look across the breadth and depth of people's supply chain as well as product mixes? Legal, public sector, but where we're going to focus today is on smart city. And so yesterday we announced the HPE agentic smart city solution. Yes, I've been practicing that.
I will get it wrong 5 times.
But very proud of what we've been able to do in a very collaborative approach, working with the town of Vail. We'll go into that a little bit more, but looking across different initial use cases, again, with the notion of Kamiwaza as that one agentic AI platform that will continue to plug not only these use cases into, but additional use cases as we go forward. When I looked at this approach and when I was thinking about the smart city, everything is always about vision. You know, we think about, you always see those big NOCs where they can do all of the vision analysis, and they have an IoT. But I'm like, cities do more than have cameras. There's a lot that when you think about a smart city, it's not just a smart department, but smart department. How do we help the city itself cross-communicate and not just create additional silos of additional silos now reinforced by AI? They already have silos of data. They already have silos of operation. How do we not have AI reinforce that, but instead help to break those down and bring those communications across the city as necessary or as helpful, as well as look at those mundane tasks, and we'll double click on this further, that would actually free up the city to deliver more citizen services, free up budget to be able to focus on the delivery of what the city's there for, which isn't necessarily having somebody manually go and look up records. So we'll dive into this a little bit more, but really delighted by the partnership with Kamiwaza, ProHawk, Video, and Black Shark. ProHawk and Video, for those who aren't familiar with them, do vision AI. ProHawk is focused on doing video restoration. I don't say enhancement because they do not use generative AI. Their actual restoration techniques are able to be brought into a court of law. So they're not actually manipulating the image, they're just exploiting the different pixels that are actually captured in the image that we don't initially see. And you'll be able to see examples of that. Video then actually brings in vision analytics as a vision AI platform. Black Shark AI lets us extend that out into geospatial. Again, some interesting different use cases and how you use these different types of information to be able to make different decisions and considerations, and then all backed and brought together by Kamiwaza. So Luke, I will pass it to you.
I want to try to fit in on the camera here a little bit. I guess we're just going to juggle back and forth.
Are you seeing customers adopt your use cases?
I'm sorry. What?
Are you seeing customers, this is for Robin, are you seeing customers, I'm Ray Lucchese, Silverton Consulting.
Thank you.
Are you seeing customers adopting some of your use cases?
Yes. And we can speak to a little bit of that. We're going to go through use case by use case, but in particular, one of the things we just did in partnership actually with Kamiwaza, and I guess I can.
Yes, you should
Sorry.
be back in.
This has to be hysterical on live stream. So we just released in September the around 508 compliance. 508 compliance, for those who aren't familiar with it, is for if you receive any federal funds, you have certain requirements in making any information that you put out there accessible for people with disabilities. So think about alt text on images, being able to read a PDF, things like that. And when you look at it, and we'll show a little bit more details on this, so I'm stealing future thunder. There's only about like 23% of like federal websites are actually compliant, because it goes into a lot more considerations and they have different state regulations and a whole bunch of things with it we'll get into. What's interesting is putting out that offering together. We're having a number of customer discussions and interest. Vail has already implemented it and is absolutely thrilled.
The town of Vail, he's from
Yes.
Colorado.
Yeah.
And everyone else should recognize that. Yes.
Yes. Yes, the town of Vail, that skiing place. So what was interesting is that the conversation is 100% on the challenge that they have with being able to disseminate information. Like with talking with Russell Forrest, who is the town manager of Vail, he said, people are actually taking information off of websites because they can't figure out how to make it compliant fast enough. And that's not the idea behind the regulation. The regulation wasn't to remove public information. The regulation was to make it accessible. But if you're going to be penalized for not having it accessible, people are figuring out different ways through it. Instead, we've actually been able to, working with Kamiwaza, they created an agentic agent that not only goes through and tells you where it needs to be remediated, but is actually able to do those remediations. We keep a human in the middle to be able to review and then post up to the website. But the level of interest has been, quite frankly, astounding. The number of meetings, the number of follow-ups that we have, because we're not going in and saying we want to sell you agentic AI. We're going in and helping you not go on a 3-year mission with your website to redo it just to make it compliant. And because before, really the way this has been done is primarily through web developers and consultants. And when you go on a multi-month, multi-year mission, we've all dealt with websites, and we all know that that is one of the least fun projects on the planet. No disrespect to all web developers and designers, but they can be very difficult and very costly for municipalities and education systems. And so they're incredibly interested in this discussion. And again, what I love about it is that I'm helping them to solve an issue. Yes, it will take HPE infrastructure to help do it. We can install all of it privately within their own data center, connected to their data behind all of their firewalls. Nothing has to be connected to the cloud or to the internet. And so it allows them to do that. But it gives us a business conversation, and that we're creating a solution that solves their business need in an economical and viable way.
So for the geeks in the room, and I sort of preempted, I put some geek slides in here. So you guys, yes, exactly. You are that one.
Well, I don't think anyone's excluded.
Yes, exactly.
They're not geeks.
We're going to do just a little deep dive on what Kamiwaza is, some of the backline tech. So then when we actually show you the actual use cases, which will be real live demo, well, not live demos, but demos that we've recorded. We can go step by step, and you can see how sort of it's all connected together. We try to differentiate ourselves effectively off of these 4 major pillars. But when you guys think about Kamiwaza, think about it as an orchestration engine. We're truly trying to sort of delineate ourselves in that. We're going to connect all the data of an enterprise, wherever the data is, in any format it is, in the exact location it is, in the exact type it is. And then we're going to connect all of its security. We're going to create an ontology scheme on it. And we're going to have that flow through multiple agentic systems, legacy file formats to make all this work. I believe Vail started 3 months ago, and we have 4 massive outcome use cases that is transforming that town in less than 3 months. That's from literally the HPE dropping the server in, us connecting the data, working with the business lines, and actually getting those flows. So once you connect all this up in this particular way, it just goes incredibly quick. So from a deep dive perspective, and for some of the scals in the room, let's just talk about what a distributed architecture and mesh is here. First, it's a full stack solution. It gets installed in a set of Docker containers. In the case of HPE, private cloud AI, it's wrapped up in Kubernetes and can be deployed and scaled pretty much in any environment. We call it opinionated, but loosely coupled. You can literally download it, get it up and working within about 15 minutes. It's about 176 packages for the full enterprise AI experience. Loosely coupled enough if there's already a solution in place or they've started a journey, our middleware can integrate with, say, a vector database that maybe is already in service and solution. Last but not least, we really wanted it to be sort of hardware agnostic. And what I mean by that is it's going to work from everything from an NVIDIA Blackwell to the RTX 6000 we're going to talk a lot about today. It's one of our favorite chipsets, all the way to Intel processors and other more unique processors in the public cloud. So it can span everything from the Trainium chipsets up at AWS, T processors at Google, all the way down to HPE gear on-prem and at the edge. And that's very important for us, once again, because we want to access all data, all locations, all formats, all services, and orchestrate that together. Now, where we really differentiate ourselves... Yeah, please.
Keith, this is Keith from the advisor bench. You just mentioned a very, very different sets of architectures. I don't want to just gloss over that. I'm struggling, so when I'm thinking about GPUs, AMD, ROCm versus NVIDIA, CUDA, today I have to make choices. You're telling me I'm not making a choice. What am I losing in that abstraction?
Well, I want to say you are making a choice based off of the thermal load, the cost to run it, and the amount of memory you need to actually load the system in there. And we're actually enabling you to have that choice versus being limited to just what capabilities are presented to you. What I mean by that is the actual software, when it installs, inspects the underlying hardware, and it will then deploy the inference engine that's needed to run on that particular chipset or capability. And then we expose out two APIs. We have our own standard API, and then we have an open AI API from an inferencing. So from an app or service perspective, it's always just hitting those standard APIs with the hardware completely abstracted underneath it. It will literally run on your Mac laptop all the way up to, like I said, a TPU in Google.
Hopefully we'll go more into this. I have questions. So
Ask away.
Yeah, so from that hardware delineation, we can now install this software anywhere and everywhere. Now, where it really starts to quote unquote delineate even further is the concept of our distributed our distributed data engine and our inference mesh. So the inference mesh, think about a data mesh. If you have our stack installed in multiple locations, they connect over your private enterprise links. We create our own networking above that via VXLAN, typically using Docker Swarm or other technologies. Once again, that's auto-magical. You just point the two stacks to each other. They'll negotiate what they can do to build that VXLAN link. Once they're connected, now in this mesh, we can move an inference request, the operations of AI, based off of about 40 dynamic features. But the most important one we redirect off of, and that's everything from like model type, from vision models to language models, to underlying hardware, to availability of tokens, et cetera. But the most important redirect is based off of data and data locality. So when we prep all of the data, when you install our stack and you point it to all the data, the systems of records, the flat files, the object files, we're going to talk about some cool legacy files and the Veil use cases. And we scan all of that data. We build not only metadata of that data, we build an ontology scheme of that data. We tie that to the OAuth and SAML authentication of that data, so the true enterprise security structures of that. All of that goes into our local data catalog. And then the local data catalog, when they're connected in this inference mesh, creates a global data catalog. And through that, we tie each inference request, the authentication of it, and then a recursive lookup to what data is going to be required to answer that inference. And that's live in the stream in the stack. So when you put all that together, you have this paint by numbers on the right. An app, an LLM-enabled service, a user pings our stack in the theoretical cloud in this case. That stack, when it gets the inference request, does a recursive lookup to see what data it's going to need to answer that inference request, where that data resides, and whether it's the security of that data, and does the user or the agent that is actually pinging it have access to the location, type of data, and the access to that data.
So, look, this sounds magical because let's
Usually not a compliment coming from the crowd.
the
Magic smoke.
in infrastructure world, I know you have history with storage. So as we think about traditional global file systems, we've been trying to solve this data locality problem of being able to move the data before we tried to move the data to the compute. Or so you're saying instead of taking this approach where you're moving the data to the compute, which has always been a bad model, we're moving the compute to the data regardless of the underlying compute. So in my data center, I have big GPUs. I can do all kind of fancy stuff. At the edge, I get a I get a weird vision. I get a weird video from the vision inference that's running there. Send that to the centralized compute. It says, "Oh, that's different. Do this different inference thing that we haven't established yet. Now run that, even though that's running on CPU."
Correct.
Okay.
Also, this is why I don't mean to keep dropping HPE, and I'll do that plenty of times. I mean, HPE's ed thermal compute loads, I think, can get up to literally almost 250, 300 degrees. The ones that we're testing with the DOW recently out in Hawaii, all the way to the DL480s with just the RTX 6000 and air-cooled servers, all the way up to the new G300 NL72s. So being able to have that wide scope with our software running on it all, redirecting where the inference goes and what data is next to it, is why we are so fortunate to partner up with a big partner like HPE.
So let's talk about that as part of the challenge. So one of the challenges enterprises have is sizing, especially sizing at the edge. I don't know how much compute to put somewhere. Are you providing telemetry data back to the folks running the entire distributed mesh to know that, oh, we need to call HPE GreenLake to replace out these CPU-bound systems with L40s or
RTX 6000, not L40s.
or whatever the
latest.
Platform, the latest and great. Maybe I have some L40s laying around. I don't know. Whatever the case, are you providing that telemetry data back so that I can resize my infrastructure as needed?
Next slide, I'll dive into that. But our App Garden, which are agents that have heads on it, tied to our tool shed and tied to our model deployment engine, and they make full recommendations on what app you're deploying, with what model you should deploy, and do you actually have the hardware and the capability in that, and it's all shown in a nice GUI on the stack. It can all be also discovered via API. We do get that telemetry from all of our customers except the DoD and IC community. So we have a wide swath of deployments across Fortune 500, Global 2000s that make those recommendations.
So if I have I'm sorry, Ray, one last question. So if I have a process that needs to run on the edge, but I don't have the capacity to actually run it, I'll basically know before I deploy the...
That's correct. It will actually tell you. Because the agent that you're deploying to do that, like a visual language model with an app, it'll tie those two and say the underlying hardware won't support it.
Luke, are you saying you're going to direct an inference based on thermal requirements?
We absolutely do. Nice jaw drop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we get a camera on? Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, just to finish this off here, in this sort of modality, you have that app, that service, it pings our stack in the cloud. The stack in the cloud does that recursive lookup of that metadata, make sure that the user or the agent that made the request can actually access the data, and then where the data is. What it realizes in this particular example is it needs data from both the cloud and data at the data center. So it runs the RAG process with the data in the cloud. It then sends an informed inference request to the stack in the data center. That stack gets hit. It then runs its RAG process with its data locally via its security in the data center. It gets a summary of the answers. Keep in mind, this process could be 10,000 plus data pools. So for every inference, the actual amount of data that needs to be pulled needs to be re-ranked, needs to be re-ran, needs to be re-pulled, needs to be re-ranked to get these very long agentic ones is typically somewhere in the range of 1 to 1,000 of 1 to 10,000. Like, it's a massive data structure, massive data pool. It does all of that locally, and then it sends the summary back to the initial stack that made the request, in this case, the cloud one. It concatenates the two summaries and gives a single answer back to the user that made the request or the agent that made the request. In doing this, we process entirely locally, but we summarize globally. Summary results could literally be sent over a dial-up modem, a 1920 literally kilobit modem from the 1990s. because it's just small amounts of text at that point, and it's just reconcatenating those, rerunning an inference, putting them back together, and giving a single answer. In doing this, we have transformed the ability for enterprises, as you'll see with Vail once again, within 3 months to do massive processing and capabilities entirely locally, entirely in their distributed environments as well, but get their answer back where they need it and get it presented out. And we're seeing an uptick that has just been phenomenal, really helped and led by our partners at HPE. Stalked, shunned, okay, all right.
Scott Robon, Solutional. If you're going here, great, but I would love to spend time on all the agent definition. What are your agents really doing autonomously? What speed bumps have you seen? How have you improved based on speed bumps and things of that nature?
Yeah, so we have 4 live demos that Robin and I will go through. Not live, I'm sorry, they're recorded, but they're actual demos of actual use cases at Vail that we just showed at GTC. It'd be great if we break those down, because then there's some meat there versus me esoterically throwing it out. 2 more last slides, and the next slide will finish off some of the questions we got there. To do this too, we had to redo the security paradigm, literally from the ground up. So we invented something called REBAC, and like everything in security, you need another acronym, right? So RBAC, the traditional role-based authentication, doesn't work in the agentic world. You have a user or you have a sub-agent that typically makes a request to a larger agent. That larger agent now has a much larger amount of data it can access in security structure. That agent might talk to another location and another agent there, which might have an even larger amount of data that it can access, et cetera. If at any one of the points you get an inference of data sets that are larger than the initial user request or agent has access to, you can have a much elevated answer from a security posture and procedure. Because we understand all the data of an enterprise, we have the ontology of it and we have the metadata structure of it, we can build an attribute-based structure along with the relationship-based structure and the role-based structure. Put it all together and you have REBAC. What that allows is a user that has only this level of context to talk to an agent that has this level of context to talk to an agent that has this level of context. This agent knows only inferred data that the user should actually have, so it's not an elevated structure that they get a response back at. Think about it in HIPAA environments, how important that would be, because you could cross not only HIPAA zones, but GDPR. Think about it in KYC environments, know your customer in financial services, where you might have a larger customer that has many sub-LLCs. You might have an LLC that's part of that user, but shouldn't be able to access other LLC structures, and so on and so forth. In the agentic world, this has been a game changer. This has been adopted in the highest levels of the DOW and the IC community based off of us, and this is being adopted in Fortune 500s left and right. I probably talked to at least 75 of the Fortune 500s in the last month about this particular feature alone. Not only do we have active deployments with HPE, we have many POCs that are running in the wild right now, like many, all based on testing this out and using this, because this is the main thing that's really held the enterprise back: data access and security, and getting agents to actually work and do the work. Last but not least,
can I back up on
please, yeah.
the REBAC piece? Given the non-deterministic behaviors of large language models, I assume you're doing some deterministic agent tool building, but then I guess I'm just trying to build out like how that actually works logistically, because you're going to have different kinds of data that are going to require different kinds of policies. You're going to have to read those in and be able to apply these kind of attribute-based policies. Sounds like by hand, or
no, fully. Our ontology is fully auto-magically built by subsets of models.
What worries me is the non-deterministic aspects.
It's actually very deterministic. So from a vectorization standpoint, we actually use like BM models, which are just static models for actually building those representations. They're not LLMs, and then that actually creates the vectorization. Also, in any of the security constructs, we actually have the LLMs write code, and it's executed code every time for understanding it. That's exactly it. Yeah. So those are entirely deterministic all the way through. Further, just because I love hip hop, as Keith or somebody knows, we have a product called Run It Back Turbo. We actually run anything over 50 times, and we can discard any non-deterministic calls out of that. So out of a 50 inference in a row, we could actually say, look, these 13 are variants, but we have 37 that were accurate, and it actually then goes with the 37 as the next one forward. So effectively, because we're non-token bound, we're using big HPE servers with big NVIDIA cards, we can literally run tens of thousands of inferences even if needed to, and get that deterministic piece down to almost a near science. Like we're looking at 98 to 99% on all processing we do in the enterprise.
So, Luke, this is a pain point for me again, Keith, from the advisor bench. This idea, I think one of the things from, and I'm going to be a little controversial here, as if this is new. NVIDIA and Jensen talks about the token economy, but the reality, if anyone has used a code agent or anything that needs this type of recursive type of analysis, CTOs I talk to have no interest in paying for tokens per whatever. They just don't want to pay for tokens. They want to pay for outcomes. What have been your conversations when you tell this process to customers who are considering on-premises solutions versus, and I think even when I talk to the big cloud providers, none of them are saying that customers are coming to them asking them for tokens per, how much am I paying per token?
So marketing wise, we're talking about the being untoken bound or the unbound economy. And the reason you need that, and I believe I can pause a couple of the Vail use cases, is just to build the ontology of a decent city, a Vail. It's somewhere in the range of like 35 to 70 billion tokens. And that ontology probably needs to be reconstructed monthly, quarterly, off of change data, new data, et cetera. So that would mean somebody holding up one of those OpenAI plaques from the dev day, like every month about, I'm one of the top 10 users of OpenAI type scenario. When you can be unbound by tokens, the things you can do are just astronomically different than what goes on there. In each one of the use cases, we actually try to have our agents now actually show the amount of tokens they're processing, because it's in the millions and billions to accomplish these things. It's a concept that the code sort of generators, the cursors and OpenAIs, they don't show that because it's actually pretty small tokens, input tokens, and very small output tokens. What we're accomplishing with our production use cases, once again, being unbound with these RTX 6000s and these B300s, is amazing because you can throw so much horsepower at it. And that's what the businesses don't care. Give me a fixed cost and a real outcome, and they're signing up for it. Give me a variable outcome and a variable cost, and it's never been an enterprise adoption.
Except for the cloud.
Except
No, I actually totally don't agree with that. The concept of the cloud is you can go in and burst up and burst down, but I have yet, and I mean yet, to work with a Fortune 500 that is doing more than about 5% variability in the cloud. It is fixed workload, fixed workload,
Well,
fixed
they
workload.
just reduce that market to the Fortune 500, where
Sure.
the variability of a few $1 million here and there is real important in the departments, but not so important.
And in AI, that's almost entirely why you're starting to see massive repatriation, because these GPUs are running 24/7, 7 days a week. And they're not paying for the cost structures in the cloud. And neo clouds like CoreWeave that are adopting for enterprise workloads and use cases are pulling those workloads out of your general top 4 clouds, like constantly.
Yeah, I agree that repatriation's day has finally come after we've been talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. No,
No.
With your re-R back and control of data, how are you handling that, or how are you also sandboxing MCPs, tool calling, and even tool registry altogether?
Yep. So tool registry goes into our orchestration platform and what we call a tool shed, just to have a sort of cute little vernacular. The tools are tied to agents. The agents are in our app garden. Those two then tie to the metadata and the authentication structure of the actual inference itself from the agent. So you have an agent that can only call on certain tools. Those tools have to be in the authentication structure of the user, and the data the tool calls, whether it's SAP, et cetera, has to fall within that readback authentication. So once you've wrappered all of that and connected all of that data, that's what allows these agents and use cases to just...
So let's use your exact same HIPAA workflow. You have a user making a request, and the workflow ends up hitting an agent that makes a tool call. The response data to the tool, how are you sanitizing that and cleaning it up before it gets dumped back into the tokens?
User makes a request to the agent. The agent then verifies that the tool it's going to call is going to be able to access data that the user actually has access to, because we understand the metadata of even the SAP that the tool would actually be able to call our structured data systems like SQL. If it doesn't, it actually gets denied all the way through.
Does that have to be built into the tool wrapper?
It's built into the app wrapper, which is where the agent and inferencing happens. And you get a list of the tools in the tool shed that it can actually access and what metadata it actually accesses. And that flow sort of pulls it all together. We have it really beautifully shown in the GUI. But really, it's all API calls because you want to structurally understand all of this through our system.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of building on that. So, because that's always been the challenge with a lot of tools, is not everything allows the ability to do like assume rule type actions where it's like I need to be able to do this as this particular user so that I get restricted by the RBACs that are built into that application. For those things that don't have that ability, you have kind of some additional overlays that you're able to offer to be able to help build that functionality out.
Yeah, so that's the reback piece. So the actual metadata construct of the data, we can understand the relationship of it. So maybe it's financial data, but maybe it's financial data based off of data centers. You can then flag that so that a CIO would actually have access to that, where the CIO shouldn't access the actual underlying P&L of, say, the organization. And that's a very, very keen thing. So within agents, there's the concept of the mosaic effect. We call it out here. You can have one copy of data that's non-attributed to another set of data, but if you infer those two together, you can actually have a correlation. And what we're trying to do is understand that and stop that if it's needed type scenario. That's a sticky problem that's been around for about 70 years. Agents make it 10 times more of like an issue because now you have this inference, this godlike capability, Kamiwaza, and we want to actually be able to sort of separate that and break that out. So this is our first major approach for it. We believe we're the only ones tackling this. We have patents around it, but more importantly, we have massive installations on this.
How does that roll into your token and context management?
I don't know about, you mean tokens as in like data? Yeah, context management. So once again, all of that structure would flow back into the actual input tokens of that agent. It would either be CV cached at that point, and then that goes into the output. But they won't even get to the agent if it doesn't have access. If the original user or agent that made the request doesn't have access at the metadata or relationship level.
Do you have a workflow that's actively managing the context, or is it just part of the message bus that's happening?
You can do both. So you can do the responsive data in, or you could actually have another sub agent do guardrailing and strip out things like FI data.
But you have to do that yourself.
We have the workflow there. You would have to tell that sub agent what guardrails you want to put in place. Yeah. Last but not least, because I want to move quickly, we have a lot to cover. It's just this idea of ephemeral sessions as well. You guys asked some great questions, but if you have a session, so you've copied data that you can have in there. Once again, you're now inferencing data that maybe is related, not related. And you're getting new answers. You're getting new data created. You're getting new concepts within that session. We use deprecating tokens via JWTs so that the second that session's gone, you can't rebuild what's within the session. That's a flag we turn on for healthcare environments, financial service environments. Think now you could actually have a boardroom agent assisting the board, and you wouldn't be able to pull that back up in context post-board meeting. It actually allows you to have these sort of private inferencing sessions with data that you should have allowed. And that's another unique feature we had to build for the government agencies and large financial institutions and Fortune 500s. So quickly moving on, this is the eye chart. This is actually all the questions you guys asked. This is what the actual stack looks like. I know it's an eye chart on purpose because it is a large orchestration engine. But as Keith said, like, how do we actually keep inspecting and doing this? When I say it's that full stack delivery, this is it. The important part to think about on this, we're trying to lay this orchestration in, lay the data, lay the security, lay the context, so then anybody can create agents on top of it. And all of our Unleash AI partners can connect to us via our API, our SDK, our MCP. We actually do provide our own MCP server and client so that you're connecting to us, we're connected to the data, we're connected to the security, we're the inferencing point, and we can present back out. And that's how we can start to pull the Unleashed AI partners, HPE, and other people into capabilities. And I kid you not, I want to keep saying this. Vail started from concept 3 months ago to full production, 4 incredible use cases. And that isn't an undue timeline. We have Fortune 500, some 150 years old, that now have 20 or 30 use cases with us within the first year. It is, once you get the hard part done, getting agents to work across the enterprise is the fun part.
So, Keith Townsend from the advisor bench. And I hear the speed, but what's on the soft side, what's the disconnect? A city government that moves slow politically was able to do this in 3 months. What was the catalyst that helped them understand that they'd be willing to take this level of risk? Because this is a risky project.
I think we took a really different approach. Rather than coming in and saying, like, hi, here's our agents, which ones would you like? We instead came in and talked to them like a partner, and started with, and this was, I thought Russ had some great description of this.
Russ is the city manager. Sorry.
The city manager, as we were talking at GTC, we came in and it did initial education about different types of AI that we thought would be applicable for their scenario. Things like vision, things like working with Kamiwaza. But we did education and started talking to them about what we could do while also asking them about their challenges. So we did some initial education and then did a 2-day workshop where we really went in deep on kind of what's keeping them up at night and what's keeping them from maybe going to kind of the next level kind of from each department, as well as continuing that education and being able to bubble up kind of these 4 initial use cases. And then we've been working with them collaboratively as we've built out these use cases to ensure that they were hitting the mark for what they needed and aligned to not only their brand and approach around citizen services, but also they have this fantastic view of everyone really as a customer with so many visitors that come in. Vail has over 2 million visitors a year. When you think about during kind of 4 months of Great Powder, that there's a significant influx of population into the Vail Valley. So how do they deal with all of those different changes? So it's been a very collaborative approach, and I thought Russ had some great conversation around. They started as kind of they needed education on AI. There were skeptics to education needed, and that by going through this process holistically, rather than coming in and saying, here, we can do this, this, and this, which do you want? But instead doing it more collaboratively, that it really has changed and that the growth has been significant in the last 3 months. I think also because we've been able to deliver several of these use cases, and that people who started maybe as skeptics but came along on the journey are now asking well, what's next? What if we type of questions? And so we're already scheduling kind of that next workshop to go through and say, we've done these, excited for this. What are those what ifs and what's next now that we're starting to open the aperture of what can you actually do with the AI and where can you see benefit?
It's funny. This is everything we have play out here. I keep rolling back to it's the same stuff we face in network automation. It's the same stuff we faced in infrastructure automation. And for us, it was the new stuff is the code, and now the new stuff is the AI. Yeah. But every conversation always seems to go back to those same type of points of sitting down, talking holistically. What problems do we need solved?
Yeah, but what's really interesting about this is that the line of business is making this decision of automation. It's difficult enough to convince IT to adopt automation, but then to go to the line of business. The line of business decides to adopt automation, whether you call it AI or whatever. It is scary and it's impressive to you folks that you were able to convince city government to do this.
I agree, and I think the difference is automation is a subset of what we're talking about here. There's a lot more wrapped around this, including the stuff that Keith just talked about. But I think from a brass tacks perspective, just like with automation and now wanting to let little robots do things autonomously, we really need to think very, very thoroughly about building trust. And how do we get from, I can issue a command and it gives me a result, to releasing, an agent to go do things autonomously, and then maybe releasing it once and letting it keep doing it over and over and over again. And that's where the skeptics are. They hear our agents do blah, and what they really want to know is, what are they really doing? And how do I get from what's in the marketing to what are they really
And I think
doing?
it'll help as we go through the use cases, because it makes it practical and tactical, where everybody can see it and it becomes much more tangible rather than kind of the interpretive dance approach.
Yeah.
It's also your point there. It also goes into, you don't just throw stuff out there untrusted. You just don't make production changes on Friday.
What?
I mean,
I'm writing
society
this
would
down.
like to have
I'm
a
writing
word
this
with
down,
you.
Ryan.
Do what?
Society would like to have a word with you.
But my thought on that is that you send the agent, you send the robot, you send the human, whatever is going to do the task needs to have adequate training and he has to have adequate skill set to be able to accomplish it. And they need to prove that they've been able to do that task.
Yep.
It's no different for human as agents. And I think once we can get past that and actually do it in a training environment, then it's easier to release.
And I think also one of the things is that we chose very specific use cases so that we weren't coming in and trying to boil the ocean. I like to say we were actually coming in and boiling mud puddle by mud puddle. Now, after a while, you put enough mud puddles together and you get a lake or you get an ocean. But like we didn't go in and try to solve everything day one. We came in very specifically with the audit, with looking at housing deeds, with looking at 508 compliance. Everywhere in there, we do actually keep a human in the loop. But I think because we were very specific about what we were doing, now we can build on that to go into the what if.
So I just want to point out, we announced this yesterday, so October 28th. So you guys are the second purview of this. But these are live, these are in production, and Vail is very proud of what they've accomplished and what we've accomplished with them.